Okay, last step here. We've covered a lot. Let's talk about Spring Data REST. Many times, especially when you're building microservices, your applications are simply going to take the methods from the DAOs and expose them as REST resources. So the controllers and the services really don't have that much code in them. And it's really boilerplate. So one of the Spring Data projects is able to handle this for us automatically. Take a look at the boxes that are green here, the controller and the services. If our requirements are simple enough, we can ask Spring Data REST to automatically implement those layers for us. Spring Data REST plugs into our dynamic repositories and it generates RESTful interfaces. It generates the gets and the puts and the posts and the deletes for us. And the only time that we need code is to override the default. So back to my POM, I'll add starter data REST. Save that. Go to my team DAO and add REST resource. Now when I add a REST resource, I need to add a couple things. First of all, the path that I want this to be exposed under. So I'll just call this path. And I would like this to be exposed under the URL pattern of Teams. And then the rel. The rel is used when Spring Data REST goes to generate links to this resource. I'll go ahead and call this the same, and then I'll point out what this is actually generating when it does this. Because this is going to conflict with what I've already created over here, I'm going to switch this back to some other name like hi. Save my work. And now what I'll do is, let's see what happens when we just ask for all of the teams. Well, when we ask for all of the teams, look at this. This is kind of nice. I actually get a JSON response with an embedded object in here that has an array of all the teams. Now I just have one team, so this is a little bit redundant. And I can see that the ID of that team is 1. So you can see here that if I said teams 1, then I would get the actual team object that I was looking for. Okay? If I take a close look, you can see Spring Data REST is actually generating a number of mappings keyed by the repository, the ID, the property that we're looking for, things of this nature. So there's a whole bunch of methods for get and head and options and post. I could use a post if I wanted to. In fact, let's have some fun with that. Here is teams 1. Let me go over to my REST client here. And I would like this in JSON, so I'll just go ahead and do a get there. And now what I'd like to do, just to show you an update, is I'll do a put here. And what I'll do is I'll take, this will be fun, I'll take the JSON that I just got back and I'll put it into data. Watch this. This is a little big here. Make this a little bit bigger. I'll remove this links because I don't really need that. And what I'll do is I'll provide a mascot. The mascot will be Snoopy. And just for fun, let's go ahead and create another player. And let's add Schroeder here. And I believe Schroeder is the catcher. And I'll go ahead and execute a put request. And I have to change the content type to application JSON. And you can see that my response coming back is 204, no content. That's actually a correct RESTful response from a put. That means that everything was okay. So if I were to turn this around to a GET request, probably help if I spelled application correctly. You can see that, my mascot has been updated and my players have been updated. There's Schroeder the catcher. So what just happened here, when the application starts, the REST resource annotations are interpreted, And Spring Data REST automatically created the controllers and the request mappings for me. So I have very little to do. Now, the very last thing that we're going to do is we're going to create what we call a HotEOS RESTful response here. HotEOS stands for Hypertext as the engine of application state, and it's a RESTful concept that we don't have to go into right now. What you've just seen from Spring Data REST is that it simply returns a RESTful resource. It just converts them using either Jackson or JAXB, whatever the converter is. Now, the underlying data relationships are still there. In a real RESTful response, let me go back. In a real RESTful response, we really shouldn't get players like this when we ask for the team. What we should get is links to the players that we can follow if we, the client, are interested in obtaining information on the players. That's what HotEOS is. Now, the underlying data relationships are used to build the links if the matching repositories exist. Now, in our case, we have a relationship with team and player, but we don't have a player DAO. We don't have a player repository. So if I have a player repository, then Spring Data REST will understand that it can make links directly to the player resources. So watch this. I will add a player DAO and rerun, and we'll see that we will get links generated. So I'm back in my IDE here. Just to make things fast, I'm going to take the team DAO and I'm just going to do a save as player DAO because it's basically the same. And I'm just going to change the word team to player everywhere I see it. And the path is going to be players and the relationship is going to be players. I need to show where that comes out. And I'll just go ahead and delete these methods for you and save this. I think I'll need to restart the server in this particular case, simply because this is a new object. And when I go back to my browser and do a GET request on Teams 1, this is what it looks like before. Now I'll do a refresh. And now what I get is a link to a self-link and a link to the players. And if I follow the link to the players, you can see that I have links for each individual player. By the way, Schroeder isn't here because I was using an in-memory database, so the data from the last session went away. But you can see that I can go directly to the players here. Okay? The rel that we were talking about before, that is basically how this comes out when you are looking at the relationships here on the name here. See how this comes out as players? So this is just defining how that comes out in that particular case. So Spring Data REST noticed the two repositories. It already understood the relationship between the entities via the annotations in my team object. And Spring automatically represents the children as links. And the REST resource is used to determine the names of those links. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Basically, Spring Boot makes it easy to start projects, and it's very easy to add feature sets to projects. You can see how easily I've added it to the projects as I've been going here. It takes an opinionated approach to make it so that we can easily get up and running fast. You can run your applications as a jar or a WAR, whether they're web applications or not. Web application support is really good. What we're going to focus on a lot in this course is the REST. There's automatic resource conversion that is built in with Spring MVC. We also saw that Spring Data JPA provides automatic repository implementation, and that cuts down on a lot of code, make it so you don't have to write a lot of code. And then Spring Data REST makes automatic REST controllers.